Clogged gutters are easy to overlook, but they can quickly cause serious and costly damage to your home. Fortunately, there's an easier way to keep your gutters clean and avoid the hassle. With Leaf Filter, you can protect your home and say goodbye to cleaning gutters for good. I've realized that gutters are more complicated than they seem. It's not just about cleaning them out, it's about preventing long-term damage. That's why I chose Leaf Filter. With their permanent solution, I no longer worry about flooding, roof damage, or foundation issues. Leaf Filter uses patented technology to keep everything out except water. No holes or gaps, just reliable protection. Plus, every installation comes with a lifetime no-clogs guarantee. Protect your home and never clean out gutters again with Leaf Filter, America's #1 gutter protection system. Schedule your free inspection and take advantage of the Spring Spectacular Sale with up to 30% off your entire purchase at leaffilter.com/tune. That's a free estimate, free inspection, and 30% off at leaffilter.com/tune. See representative for warranty details.
You're listening to Campus Killings, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, Missing Persons, Beyond Bizarre True Crime, and Citizen Detective. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
Hello, Megan, and hello, listeners. Today's case was a request from Julie L. She writes that this story is incredibly personal to her, as not only did it happen in her hometown of Potsdam, New York, but her mom actually developed the autopsy photos from the investigation back in 1986.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, Julie says her mom was only 19 years old at the time, and the photos of the autopsy still haunt her today.
Sure.
There's also a lot for us to discuss about the parole process and aftermath of this case, so a big thank you to Julie for bringing Katy Hawelka's case to our attention. And as always, if you have a campus case that you would like us to consider, please send us a message on our website. We love taking listener suggestions. We would also like to give a shout out to investigative journalist William D. LaRue, whose book, A Stranger Killed Katy, provided most of the research for today's episode. We'll have a link in our show notes to her book for anyone who wants a deeper dive into Katy and her family. But before we get to Katy, let's take a look at the school where our story takes place, and that is Clarkson University. Built as a memorial to the Potsdam entrepreneur Thomas Clarkson, the school opened its doors to students in 1896. The school's namesake was a pretty remarkable man who founded the area's first public library and created a tuition-free reading room where local workers could sign up for classes so that they could learn mechanical drawing. He also provided work to those in the community who needed jobs, and he even worked alongside some of his employees on certain projects. After his untimely death in an industrial accident, Thomas Clarkson's sisters created the Thomas S. Clarkson's Memorial School of Technology to keep his humanitarian legacy alive. Today, Clarkson University has over 90 technology-focused majors, including mechanical sciences, engineering, business, and healthcare, and it ensures a small class size by only accepting around 4,000 students.
Oh, I love that.
At the time that Katy was applying in the 1980s, Clarkson was on the forefront of student technology, as they were one of the first schools to provide every single one of their students with a personal desktop computer. Now remember, this was 1983, so this was a long time before computers of any kind were a fixture in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And they were probably quite large.
Oh, I have to imagine.
At the time, students paid an annual fee of $400, which would be around $1,300 a year today, for the computers. but they would be allowed to keep them after graduation.
Oh.
Clarkson also had a very strong business program, and as Katy wanted to work in the corporate field, she saw Clarkson as the perfect choice for her undergraduate school. So who was Katy Hawelka? Like all the students we feature on the show, Katy had everything going for her when she got accepted to Clarkson in 1985. Katy was the second oldest child in her family of 6. She had 2 sisters and a brother. And though her parents divorced when she was 5 years old, the split was amicable, and Katy enjoyed a good relationship with both her mother and her father. And by all accounts, she and her siblings were also close. There were stories of Katy helping her brother learn to read, and as they grew, Katy really bonded with her younger sister, Carrie. In fact, her mother recalls that they were more like best friends than sisters. Katy was also generous and kind, and as early as 8th grade, she received a Good Citizenship Award for her positive attitude and propensity to help others. She was an honor student throughout high school, and she would take advanced courses in accounting, calculus, economics, and business law. And like many teens, she also filled her schedule with extracurriculars like cheerleading, concert band, yearbook staff, and she also spent 3 years as a member of the student council.
Oh, wow. She's like extremely well-rounded. That's a lot more than I did.
Oh, me too. Her family remembers her as enjoying a typical teen social life. She had a boyfriend her senior year of high school, she did some traveling with the school band, and she had several close female friends. And when it came time to decide what to do after high school, Katy wanted to work in the corporate field, which was a pretty big deal in the 1980s as it was male-dominated at that time. One of the things that attracted Katy to Clarkson was the fact that their ratio of male to female students was very low, with only around 800 women attending the school in 1985. Being accepted there made Katy feel like a trailblazer, and she told her sister Carrie that going to Clarkson was kind of like a woman still breaking the barriers. I'm sure it also helped that Katy received a sizable scholarship to Clarkson, but it's unclear how much that swayed her decision. Either way, she was ecstatic to be accepted, and she arrived on campus in August of 1985 to start her journey towards the corporate world. And Katy's first year at Clarkson was a typical freshman experience. She became incredibly close with a young woman named Nancy Parks, and the two became inseparable after their first semester. The two enjoyed the robust social life that Clarkson had to offer. They often went to the school's hockey games, and they frequented the local bar scene with fake IDs. Nancy remembers that she and Katy would, quote, study like crazy during the week, and then the weekends is when we partied. But Clarkson had a vigorous academic program, and as much as Katy had been an excellent student in high school, both she and Nancy found themselves struggling academically by their second semester.
This is not totally uncommon of freshmen who have some more freedom. So I'm not it's not totally surprising.
They were struggling so much that her best friend Nancy decided to transfer to St. John Fisher University. And when Katy found out that her best friend wouldn't be coming back to Clarkson for their sophomore year, she told her parents that she too wanted to transfer to St. John's.
Oh, wow.
However, Katy's parents were not about to let her give up an extensive scholarship just to follow her friend to a new school.
Sure.
And while her sister Carrie remembers Katy being upset about her parents' refusal, Katy returned to Clarkson for the fall semester of 1986. Now, there are some mixed memories here, with Katy's mother feeling that Katy made the decision herself after considering the scholarship and how strong of a business program Clarkson had. But Carrie insists that Katy really wanted to transfer and did not because her parents pressured her to stay at Clarkson.
Okay.
Whatever the reason, it would be a decision that would end in tragedy. On the night of August 28th, 1986, Katy got dressed for a night out in Potsdam after moving into her new on-campus apartment. She tucked her fake ID, which was actually her cousin's, into her back pocket along with some cash and headed down to a bar called Boogie's. While there, Katy saw a friend from one of her previous classes, an engineering major named Todd Kilburn. The two struck up a conversation and continued to hang out and catch up over beers until the bar closed around 2:30 a.m. Todd offered to walk Katy back to her apartment, and since she was recovering from an ankle injury that she had gotten over the summer, Katy was happy to have a companion for the 1-mile trek back to campus. As they walked, Katy began limping from her injury, and Todd helped her rest several times during their journey. After the third stop, the pair decided to take a shortcut from the town to the back gate of the university. When they arrived at the gate, Katy told Todd that she could get herself to her apartment since she was within the safety of the campus. And while Todd assured her that he didn't mind making sure she got all the way home, she insisted that she was fine. She was on campus. Only a few yards away was the Walker Ice Arena, which had excellent security, and she knew her way around. So Todd said goodbye and made his way back downtown to his fraternity house.
Aye.
Unbeknownst to Todd, this would be the last time that he saw Katy Hawelka alive.
And now, a brief word from our sponsors.
Clogged gutters are easy to overlook, but they can quickly cause serious and costly damage to your home. Fortunately, there's an easier way to keep your gutters clean and avoid the hassle. With Leaf Filter, you can protect your home and say goodbye to cleaning gutters for good. I've realized that gutters are more complicated than they seem. It's not just about cleaning them out, it's about preventing long-term damage. That's why I chose Leaf Filter. With their permanent solution, I no longer worry about flooding, roof damage, or foundation issues. Leaf Filter uses patented technology to keep everything out except water. No holes or gaps, just reliable protection. Plus, every installation comes with a lifetime no-clogs guarantee. Protect your home and never clean out gutters again with Leaf Filter, America's #1 gutter protection system. Schedule your free inspection and take advantage of the Spring Spectacular Sale with up to 30% off your entire purchase at leaffilter.com/tune. That's a free estimate, free inspection, and 30% off at leaffilter.com/tune. See representative for warranty details.
Hi, I'm James Wallner, host of the podcast Dakota Spotlight. In 1999, a young man with a bright future was tragically murdered at his workplace in Bismarck, North Dakota. In Homicide at House of Bottles, a new 6-part series, I take you behind the scenes of the investigation with exclusive interviews, original archival audio, and a deep dive into this peculiar crime. Listen to Dakota Spotlight in our newest season anywhere you get your podcasts or at dakotaspotlight.com.
Around 3:30 a.m., a security guard named Donald Shanty got a call that someone was trying to break into Walker Ice Arena. He'd been at another building checking unlocked doors, and on his way to the arena's back entrance, he took a service road that put him on the southeast corner of the arena. As his headlights lit up the area, he spotted a couple in the grass. Shanty would later describe how he saw, quote, a guy with his pants down. It appeared he was having intercourse with a female. I could see one of her legs bent up in the air. Shanty claimed that the man looked up briefly at the car before resuming his activities. In the moment, Shanty recalled not thinking much of this encounter. In his 2 years working security for Clarkson, he says he'd come across many students having consensual sex on campus grounds.
And isn't part of his job to stop that or intervene? I would think, I understand that happens, but I would also think part of his job would be, hey, this is not acceptable. You need to leave.
Well, fortunately, he did not do that.
Oh, okay.
So he went on to check that there were no intruders to the arena, but then he started thinking that something just didn't sit right about what he had seen. So he went back with a fellow security guard to do another round of the building in Shanty's vehicle.
And that's fair as well, that maybe he wanted another backup. Okay.
Yep. When the headlights lit up the southeast corner again, the couple was still there, though this time the man laid very still when the headlights caught him. But neither security guard was sure if the encounter warranted a call to the Potsdam police. Now, they were probably thinking, is this just two college students enjoying a night on campus? Were they doing anything illegal? I guess you could say it would be indecent exposure, but maybe they just didn't want to bother the kids, let them just do what they wanted. I don't know. But they decided to drive around the building a third time to give the couple a chance to leave.
I wish they had one of those, the speakers, hey, clear the area, or
they probably would have. You would think they would have.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know.
Yeah. But when the headlights hit the southeast corner this time, the man was gone and the woman was laying there unmoving. Realizing too late that they interrupted a sexual assault, the guards immediately called the police and requested an ambulance. They ran to the woman to find her on her back, her clothing half removed and her face bruised and swollen. There was a large pool of blood around her head and she was struggling to breathe. As Shanty turned her head to keep the blood out of her airway, the other security guard noticed a man curled up under the metal stairs to the arena. This was about 50 feet from the young woman. Officers arrived only seconds later along with an ambulance, and the woman was quickly given life-saving measures and rushed to a local hospital. Meanwhile, Shanty accompanied police to question the man who was laying under the arena stairs. But when cops pulled him out, he cried that he had been attacked by an unknown assailant when he tried to help the young woman, and the assailant had hurt his back. However, based on what Shanty had seen, this was the same man that he had seen on top of the woman not long before.
This is very brazen, too, because this guy continued to assault this woman after he had been detected by someone.
And then he didn't even run away.
Right.
He just went to hide.
Right.
Very brazen. So they called another ambulance to come pick him up so they could get his back looked at. However, the investigators' primary person of interest was very close to them at this point.
Yes.
On the way to the ER, the man identified himself as Brian McCarthy, which interested police as only a few hours prior, they received a call about a violent hitchhiker named Brian who had threatened a driver on his ride into town. The Brian McCarthy in the ambulance also fit the caller's description to a T. Even at this early juncture, police were fairly certain that Brian McCarthy had beaten and sexually assaulted the woman who was already arriving at the hospital's ER. And the extent of her assault was extreme. Even as the crew arrived at the ER, she coded. And though doctors were able to restart her heart, she was in critical condition and had to be transported 75 miles away to a larger hospital in Watertown, New York, for more advanced care. Doctors also administered a rape kit and bagged all of her clothing for police as evidence in her attack. But investigators had no idea who she was. Remember, she had an ID that was not hers because she was using a fake ID that evening.
Right.
And so they ran the name on the ID and it came back to a young woman from California who was very much unharmed and currently in California. So it would take them several hours of research to realize that their Jane Doe was in fact Katy Hawelka, who was carrying her cousin's fake ID. Once they were able to determine who Katy was, the next steps were alerting her family and seeing if Brian McCarthy would confess. Detective John Peretta was one of the first investigators at the hospital, and when he spied Brian strapped to a gurney at the back of the ER, Brian exclaimed, "John, you have got to help me."
Oh, wow. How did these two know each other?
Well, I don't think you'll be surprised to know that Detective Peretta was quite familiar with Brian because the young man had had several run-ins with the police.
Sure.
He was a known drug user and a petty thief. And actually, Peretta had personally arrested him 2 years prior for breaking into apartment buildings in the downtown area.
Oh, so he's an escalator. Okay. Career criminal
Yes.
escalator is what I see just based on what you told me, but okay.
And actually, as you're saying that, only a month prior to Katy's assault, police had been called when Brian instigated a violent confrontation with an insurance agent, and it left the agent horrifically beaten and in need of hospitalization.
Yeah, okay. This fits.
For some reason, though, in that crime, the agent didn't want to press charges, so Brian was never arrested for that crime. Because had he been, then, maybe he would have been locked up at this time.
Correct.
So with all of this in mind, Detective Peretta immediately read Brian his rights, and not surprisingly, Brian declined to speak to him. The detective also took photographic evidence of Brian's personal state, and the photos would reveal that Brian's knuckles on his right hand were discolored, and he had noticeable blood spatter on his boots. Around 5:30 a.m., Brian was given x-rays and a thorough physical exam, and probably not surprising, he was found to have no injuries, further showing that he had falsified claims of being attacked. After his clothing was bagged for evidence and samples were taken from him to compare against Katy's rape kit, he was given new clothing by police and he was put into custody. At 10:30 a.m. on August 29th, Brian was taken in for official questioning and read his rights a second time. And this time, Brian agreed to talk.
Oh, I'd like to hear this. Is he going to continue with the story about being assaulted as well? Okay, let's go.
Yeah, there you go. He stuck to a story about an unknown assailant hitting him in the back, and he claimed he hadn't even seen a woman near the arena, so he couldn't have assaulted her.
And I'm sorry, what was he doing on the campus, I wonder, because he's not a student there. So I'm just curious to see how this all plays out.
Yeah. So despite this, the eyewitness accounts from the security guards, along with the blood and the bruising on Brian's knuckles, was enough for police to charge Brian with the rape and assault of Katy. And about 3 hours after he was charged, he told police he wanted to change his statement. This time, he explained how he'd been up by the Walker Arena after hitchhiking into town, and he saw a girl and a guy sitting on the grass laughing and talking.
Okay.
He said he watched them from a nearby rock until they parted ways, and then he continued walking around the arena. As he did, he came across the girl again, but this time she was alone, squatting near a bush to urinate.
Right.
She had half removed her pants and her surgical boot to do so. Remember I said she had an ankle injury?
Yes, okay.
So he found her in a pretty vulnerable position also because she had this injury and she didn't have the boot on.
I mean, the chances, too, of an opportunistic crime like this are very rare. It's almost incredible that she had a guardian the entire time until this small window where a predator is literally lurking.
Yep.
Terrible.
While he started to walk by her, he says he turned around and tried to take advantage of her by pushing her face first into the arena wall several times. He claims she fell down after that, and that he pulled her away from the arena by her feet. He says he then tried to sexually assault her, but he was unable to get an erection.
Oh, my God.
Details of his story wavered and changed throughout the police questioning, but by the end, he was honest about the brutality of the attack, admitting to kicking Katy in the face, as well as punching her so hard that her neck snapped back. He also said he picked her up and threw her to the ground. Brian actually alluded in one of his confessions that he beat Katy out of the frustration that he felt because he was unable to get an erection. I mean, this is as close to motive as we're really ever going to get.
Yes.
You know, he didn't know her.
Yes.
And he also gives no other possible motive other than clearly he was just a violent sexual offender who was on the prowl.
Yes.
What nobody knew at this juncture was just how quickly the assault charges would turn to murder.
Oh, yeah.
We'll return after a brief word from our sponsors.
Clogged gutters are easy to overlook, but they can quickly cause serious and costly damage to your home. Fortunately, there's an easier way to keep your gutters clean and avoid the hassle. With Leaf Filter, you can protect your home and say goodbye to cleaning gutters for good. I've realized that gutters are more complicated than they seem. It's not just about cleaning them out, it's about preventing long-term damage. That's why I chose Leaf Filter. With their permanent solution, I no longer worry about flooding, roof damage, or foundation issues. Leaf Filter uses patented technology to keep everything out except water. No holes or gaps, just reliable protection. Plus, every installation comes with a lifetime no-clogs guarantee. Protect your home and never clean out gutters again with Leaf Filter, America's #1 gutter protection system. Schedule your free inspection and take advantage of the Spring Spectacular Sale with up to 30% off your entire purchase at leaffilter.com/tune. That's a free estimate, free inspection, and 30% off at leaffilter.com/tune. See representative for warranty details.
Hello everyone, this is Robin Warder, host of the true crime podcast, The Trail Went Cold. If you grew up watching the classic television show Unsolved Mysteries, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I profile a new unsolved murder or missing persons case and share all the baffling details. Afterward, I provide my own personal analysis and theories about what might have happened. This is a show for true crime buffs who are fascinated by cold cases and love to discuss them and pick them apart in an attempt to figure out the truth. So be sure to check out our podcast to learn about some truly bizarre unsolved mysteries where the trail went cold.
75 miles away at Watertown Hospital, Katy's parents were told that the attack had caused permanent brain damage and that their daughter was subsisting on life support. After 3 days in the ICU, Katy was declared officially brain dead. She would never wake up, and her parents were given the impossible decision of whether or not to pull the plug. After a day of contemplating the harrowing choice, they decided to take their daughter off of life support. Katy died on September 1st of 1986. And an autopsy would be performed 6 hours later. While her cause of death was ruled as asphyxiation by manual strangulation, the ME's report showed that Katy had suffered greatly before the end, as she had been conscious during the attack. Her body was covered in defensive wounds, including a fractured finger and multiple deep bruises to her forearms, which is a clear indication that she had fought back. Based on the swelling and bleeding of her face, neck, and shoulders, it was determined that Katy had obtained multiple strong hits to her face and upper body. She was also heavily bruised on her inner thighs, and internally her throat was bleeding and swollen. Brian McCarthy's charges were upgraded to second-degree murder, and a grand jury indicted him on 3 counts. The first was alleging that McCarthy intentionally killed Katy. The second was alleging that he raped and strangled her. And the third was alleging that he strangled her while attempting to rape her. Now, this was done because at the time of the grand jury proceedings, there was no forensic evidence to prove that there was sexual penetration. So the 3 counts here would cover all the bases.
I see. So what happens now? Is there any discussion of a plea? I mean, I don't even know that the prosecutors would want to offer him one, to be honest, but maybe for her family, I don't know.
Yeah, so Katy's family was adamant with prosecutors that they did not want any type of deal.
Right.
And Brian's defense team filed many motions. They were trying to suppress his taped police confession. They also wanted to have him evaluated for competency. However, I think because of the potential confession suppression, I hate that together. It sounds so weird. However, because of the potential to have the confession suppressed, prosecutors argued that a plea would be beneficial in this case.
I wonder what they were worried about with the confession. That kind of worries me. Like, was he not Mirandized at the time?
Remember, he was Mirandized twice. So I don't know.
I'm wondering why they were worried about that, but okay.
I don't know, but the only thing I can think of is, as far as the punishment goes, all 3 indictments carried the same sentence of 25 years to life. So even if he only pled to one of them, we're still looking at a pretty long incarceration. So in the end, the family agreed to accept a plea. But what would Brian McCarthy do? Well, Brian did plead guilty, but only to the 3rd indictment, in which he did not have to plead to intentional murder or to rape. So what kind of sentence would this get him? So the judge sentenced him to 23 years to life, with parole eligibility beginning in 2009. Now, just so you don't have to do the math here, this would mean that he would be just 46 years old when he was eligible for parole.
I'm doing the math here, and I know that she was murdered in 86.
86.
So if he's eligible for parole then in 2009...
That's 23 years.
That's 23 years. So he's parole eligible at the time of his sentence. He has to serve his full sentence.
Yeah, 23 years to life, though, but
right,
meaning he could go for parole at 46, but he could get denied.
Right. Okay,
but,
got it.
I mean, I don't know how we feel about this because, even serving the full 23 years, 46 years old is very young to be paroled, it feels like.
I can tell you exactly how I feel about it. I mean, I think it's wrong. It's absolutely not.
Yes.
It's absolutely problematic for a violent, predatory career criminal who is 46 years old and getting out of prison. No, I mean, I know exactly how I feel.
Yeah, and the family, of course, did not feel that this was justice. And while they recognize that nothing can bring Katy back, the fact that McCarthy specifically pled to the indictment that negated the rape and intentional murder, that's what made the family feel that he was refusing responsibility for his actions and had no remorse.
Well, of course. And I mean, who wants to see? He's getting out as a man, we've discussed this on our other shows, a man that can start over, have a family. He's got a whole life in front of him, It's way too young and not punitive, not nearly punitive enough for what he did.
But where the criminal courts were not able to provide the level of justice that they sought, there were still the civil courts. And in the family's estimation, Clarkson University bore some responsibility in Katy's murder.
I agree.
Now, immediately following Katy's assault, the university was incredibly supportive of Katy and her family. Clarkson's president actually drove the 75 miles to the ICU to console Katy's parents while she was on life support. And at this time, the family made public statements that they did not hold the university liable for what had happened to their daughter. Clarkson also provided bus transport for any faculty or student who wanted to attend Katy's funeral. And on September 7th of 1986, the school hosted a memorial for Katy that was attended by over 400 students. But when Katy's family learned through newspaper articles, and not through the university, that 2 security guards had seen McCarthy raping their daughter and did not immediately call police.
Forget it.
Well, that's when their stance drastically changed.
Rightfully so.
Can you believe they had to find that out through newspaper articles?
No, I cannot. I'm so infuriated by this case.
In February of 1987, the Hawelkas sued Clarkson University, the 2 security guards who had witnessed the assault, and Brian McCarthy for a total sum of $550 million. Now, the suit against the university and the guards stipulated that not only had the 2 security guards been hired with little experience and had not received proper training, but the path that Katy had been walking past the arena was a well-known cut-through that a lot of students used, but the university failed to provide adequate lighting, and its lack of security had allowed non-university passerby access to the campus.
Right.
I think they have a strong case here on all 3 of those points. The university replied by taking the suit to New York Supreme Court to have the charges against the university and its 2 security guards dismissed, arguing that McCarthy was the one who had assaulted and killed Katy. And get this, if you weren't angry enough, Megan, they alleged that Katy herself was, quote, culpable since she had been walking alone at 3:30 in the morning.
Oh.
You heard that right. The university really blamed the victim, and this is in the court paperwork.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
The state Supreme Court did not dismiss the case, even though Clarkson reported hiring their first director of security in 1987. They say they never had one before. And so basically they're saying after what happened, they hired a director of security, and they also had a new security plan in the wake of Katy's murder. A year later, in 1988, the university settled with the family for an undisclosed amount. Interestingly, not even the judge presiding over the case was allowed to know the amount. I've never heard that before.
So
apparently a stipulation of the settlement was that nobody could know the amount, including the judge.
Huh. Interesting.
And the family made it really clear that they wanted the lawsuit to rectify the victim blaming, and they wanted to make an example of the school for their lack of security.
Sure.
For them, it was never about the money.
Yeah, of course not.
Clarkson's president also provided the family with a 3-page written apology for claiming Katy was culpable in her attack, as well as detailing their upgrades to security measures on campus. Katy's mother, Terry, also joined forces with other parents who had lost their college-age children to murder. She became active with the Victims of Crime Advocacy League, also known as VOCAL, and the Clary family of the Clary Act.
Yeah, of course.
You know that
yes.
name. In 1989, Terry and the Clarys lobbied the New York legislature to pass a law that would require colleges to publicly publish their campus crime statistics. And while it failed at the state level, U.S. Congress did end up passing the, quote, Student Right to Know and Campus Security Act, and this was in November of 1990. Now, today, this is known as the Clery Act.
Mm-hmm.
But while justice was completed both criminally and civilly for the Hawelkas, they were unable to completely put their grief to rest. Brian McCarthy had 23 years before he was eligible for parole, and for the family, those years went by very quickly. In 2009, Brian McCarthy was eligible for his first parole. This meant that the family was entitled to give victim impact statements to the parole board on why they believed that he should be kept incarcerated.
Right.
In addition to their statements, the family created a blog to tell Katy's story with an online petition to help keep McCarthy incarcerated.
That's what I would do.
The family also agreed to be interviewed by the local press in order to advertise their petition to the public. And by the time of McCarthy's hearing, the petition to keep him incarcerated for Katy's murder had over 2,000 signatures. And while he was denied parole at that time, he would be eligible to try again every 2 years for the rest of his life.
Like, I worked in probation and parole, and every state does it differently. There's cases I've covered where someone's denied and they can't petition again for 6 years. They can't petition again for 8 years, but every 2 years, ugh.
So I understood it that was a fairly standard parole procedure, but it sounds like there is no standard.
Well, no, I guess, yes, it might be standard of most states.
Or at this time, maybe it could have been.
And I know some states do 3 years, but I absolutely know states that it's, and it might, it also might be by the crime as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that there is a standard.
So Katy's brother, Joe, described this experience as Groundhog's Day, as every 2 years, he and his family had to reopen the wound of his sister's murder in order to give their victim impact statements to the board.
Awful.
And I couldn't even imagine what this must be like. I understand they want to keep him in, so they're going to keep showing up. But by them showing up, they have to keep reliving the worst experience of their life.
Plus, it's like agonizing. Like 2 years isn't that long. So, once you've done it, you have to go back in 2 years. Like it's not that long that you don't start stressing about it and thinking about it almost immediately.
Yes. And because of that, in fact, in 2023, the family turned to the press yet again. But this time, they publicized their legislative fight to have parole hearings spaced out for every 5 years instead of every 2 years.
Okay.
Unfortunately, their proposed bill was turned down in 2023, and it's a very controversial bill because many New York prisoner rights groups feel that 5 years is too long to wait in between parole eligibility.
Yeah, it's a hard one because I'm really dependent on the crime, the behavior, and everything. I mean, for this guy, of course, you don't want to see him eligible every 2 years, but I do understand why that's not appropriate for every case.
I mean, we have both worked with many people who have been denied parole in New Jersey, and if they had to wait 5 years, it would be a grave injustice.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
As of the airing of this episode, Brian McCarthy has been denied parole 8 times, and he remains incarcerated for the rape and murder of Katy. Her family's victim impact statements have always been taken into account by the parole board, but the transcripts from McCarthy's hearings truly showcase an individual who has still not yet taken responsibility for his crime.
Yep.
You want to be angered again, Megan?
Not really.
this episode is. I'm sorry. I need to share this, though. In both his 2009 and his 2013 hearings, he called Katy by the wrong name when asked who he had victimized. One time calling her Catherine Walker and another time calling her Kim Avitcan.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know where those names come from. Just adding insult to injury, but okay.
I don't know. He also falsely claimed in all 8 of his hearings that he and Katy had known each other previously and that they were meeting up for consensual sex the night he killed her.
Well, see, the reason this is good, though, is because he's going to keep himself in prison.
Yep, exactly.
He
doesn't
just
realize.
going to keep himself there, which is great news.
Yep. And in all 8 hearings, when he was asked how he and Katy became acquainted, he falsely claimed that he had met her at a Clarkson hockey game in which they ended up sitting next to each other. However, it was known that Katy had only ever went to hockey games with her roommate, and her roommate had never seen him. His record during his incarceration was also littered with problematic behavior.
Of course it
So
was.
his words are not the only thing keeping him behind bars.
Right.
I don't think you'll be surprised to know that he was not an angel when he was serving his sentence.
Not surprised at all.
He had several infractions for violence towards other inmates.
Mm-hmm.
He verbally threatened prison guards on multiple occasions and also consistently stole from the commissary. During his 23 years prior to parole eligibility, he was moved through 8 different prisons for, quote, unsuitable behavior.
Right.
And also taken into account by the parole board had been the fact that McCarthy was on supervised parole out of a prison in Virginia in 1986 for larceny. And this is when he had hitchhiked his way to Potsdam and murdered Katy, which I didn't know previously, that he was on parole when this happened.
That's not surprising either, but yeah.
According to his records, McCarthy did take part in several rehabilitation programs during his incarceration, but as the parole board stated in his 2019 hearing, quote, discretionary release shall not be granted merely as a reward for good conduct or efficient performance of duties while confined.
Right.
The panel felt that you have still yet to fully and adequately examine your motives that led you to this terrible crime, which remains a concern. Parole eligibility is an ethically difficult battleground where the line between justice for victims and their families and the ability for criminals to rejoin society as reformed citizens is often gray. And this is an area we often discuss in our classes.
Yes.
But for Katy's family, the only justice they see is in Brian McCarthy's lifetime incarceration. And as Terry told the press in 2019, as mentally exhausting as it is to relive her daughter's murder every 2 years, she is prepared to do it for the rest of her life if it means justice for Katy.
I can certainly understand that.
Well, this was clearly a very frustrating case. This was a preventable crime.
Yes.
But I think Brian McCarthy is exactly where he needs to be.
Yes, and I think due to Brian McCarthy, he's going to be there for a very long time.
I agree. Before we go today, if you'd like to support Campus Killings, consider subscribing to the show with an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcasts.
Your subscription will get you VIP access to all the shows on the network that not only includes hundreds of episodes of ad-free listening, but also bonus content and early access to episodes.
For only $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year, you'll unlock a variety of listener benefits, and you'll be supporting this show in the process.
Head over to Apple Podcasts and search for either Campus Killings or AbJack, and you can start your subscription with a free trial.
Your support is greatly appreciated.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today, and we hope you'll join us on the next episode of Campus Killings.
Campus Killings is hosted by Dr. Megan Sachs and Dr. Amy Schlossberg, with research and writing by Abigail Belcastro. It's produced by Mike Morford of AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to follow Campus Killings on social media. You can find Campus Killings on Twitter with the handle @CampusKillings or on Facebook at facebook.com/Campus Killings. You can also visit the show's homepage at campuskillings.com. Be sure to tune in every other Saturday for new episodes of Campus Killings.